The Elixni society is divided into aristocracy, represented by the various houses in which members of the Elixni would be assigned to based on merits. However, despite the social system in place, none of the houses were known to be on favorable terms with one another. Each house is led by their political leader, known as a Kel, with prime servitors being worshipped as gods. This is due to their ability to produce and provide a steady supply of ether, along with the production of lesser servitors. Archons would serve a dual role, as both the high priest and chief engineer for their respective house, being the mediator between the Kel and the prime servitor. Each of the three roles mentioned contributes to the house's stability. Without a Kel, a house falls without leadership. Without an Archon, the prime servitor would remain vulnerable. And without the prime servitor, the house would lose its ability to sustain its ether supply. With this in mind, the loss of any part of their leadership would cause extensive panic amongst the Elixni house, often weakening them to the point of potentially permanently damaging them. Right below the upper echelons of the Elixni house leadership would be the barons and captains, along with the individual crews that they command. Captains are capable Elixni who have proven themselves by gathering a following of either vandals, dregs, or a combination of both, who would serve as the captain's crew. Though most captains are affiliated with a specific house, independent captains exist, operating outside the social practices of any Elixni house. Above the captain ranks are the barons, who ranks only below the Kel of each house, being granted their own skiffs as well as their own crew. However, unlike captains who could operate independently, there are no known independent barons. A majority of the Elixni infantry consists of vandals and dregs, with dregs being the lowest ranks, seeking to prove their worth. They are often the target of discrimination, having both their lower arms either cut short or removed completely. This humiliation leads them to desperation, zealously acting as shock troopers with the intention of earning their position as vandals and being permitted to regrow their arms. Despite that, the average life expectancy of a dreg is notoriously short. Vandals are the veteran and seasoned infantry, dregs who were able to survive their trials by ordeal, who would aspire to become captains themselves and to one day lead crews of their own. As one of the major fallen houses, the House of Kings, along with the House of Judgement, initially came into light during the Edge Wars, being the ones to put an end to the internal strife and ushering in a second Golden Age. After making their way to the Sol system, the Kings were, along with the House of Devils, the only ones to settle down on Earth. However, unlike the Devils, they chose to remain in the shadows. The Kings were responsible for uniting the House of Devils and House of Winter in a combined effort to take the city in the Battle of Twilight Gap. However, unlike other Fallen, this was done through sheer manipulation, with Kras, Kel of Kings, taking the death of Solkis, Kel of Devils, to his advantage, gaining more influence over the House of Devils. Even during the Wolf Rebellion, Kras spared two of his barons, Paskin and Vekis, to meet with the wolves under the impression of joining forces. During the Taken War, the kings were not spared from losing territory, as the King's Watch was overrun, becoming a lair for a shade of Oryx. And by the end of the Siva crisis, along with the beginning of the Red War, the House of Kings were seemingly no more. However, continued encounters with the House of Dusk has revealed that many King's members have since joined under their banner. In a grand gesture of betrayal, Aldrin took it upon himself to wipe out the last surviving House of Kings members, with Krask being docked of all 4 arms, and demoted to Drag. The remaining kings were, however, raised as his army. Being one of the oldest of Elixni or Fallen houses, the House of Judgement serves as the mediator of peace and unity. Existing since before the downfall of their civilization, the house serves as both an advisor to Kells and enforcers of peace, preventing infighting between the houses. After making their way to the Sol system, the house have all but splintered, with various numbers joining other fallen houses in order to survive. This made maintaining the peace between the houses very difficult, and once the Wolf Rebellion was stopped and a number of the wolves submitted to the Reef, so too did the House of Judgement. This, however, was not done in a subservient manner, as Varix, the Kell of Judgement, had proven himself a valuable asset. Acting as the spymaster for the Reef, he was able to gain valuable resources in order to find the other Fallen in hopes of uniting them once more. The Fallen House of Exile serves as an abnormality amongst the Fallen noble houses. Having no leadership, the Exiles are made of renegades from other Fallen houses after their defeat at the Twilight Gap. Despite having no formal leadership, upper-ranking house members still existed, as shown when Kate 6 came across a Baron belonging to the House of Exile. Without a formal lair to call their own, the Exiles found themselves in a prolonged war against the Hive on the Moon. However, this attempt was futile, and the remnants were implied to have now joined the House of Dusk, with several of their territories on the Moon now occupied by House of Dusk members. The House of Stone was, unfortunately, one of the only known houses not to have survived the Whirlwind event, with many of their members, including their Kell Chelkis, apologies if I mispronounced that, having fought against and lost to Oryx, the Taken King. Despite being regarded as the lowest noble house in the aftermath of the Whirlwind, the House of Rain was initially presumed destroyed, as mentioned by Varix. However, recent events revealed that they did manage to have survived and reached the Sol system, making their way to Mercury, where they massacred a human settlement. This prompted their fateful encounter with the Vex and the Titan known as Saint 14. During an attack, the House of Rain managed to overpower Saint 14, forcing him to be on the defensive, and with the intervention of the Guardian who had traveled back in time, the duo managed to push the House of Rain back. However, years later, the House of Rain found themselves on the receiving end of a vengeful offensive, led by none other than Saint 14 himself. This led to the event known as the Breaking of the Weapons of Rain, which left the fates of the remaining Rain members all but grim. Unlike the other houses who found themselves settling in and around the inner Sol system, the House of Wolves remained distant, living out by the Jovians in the outer regions of the Reef. Initially, the Wolves had intended to join the Battle of Twilight Gap, but with the intervention of the Reef, their stronghold on Ceres was instead attacked, in a series of battles known as the Reef War. This resulted in the complete submission of the remaining Wolves members, with Varix being crowned the new Kell of Kells leading them. Their submission did not last long, with the return of Skolas, now calling himself the Kell of Kells, leading the Wolves to an uprising against the Awoken. Having her hand forced, Marisol then opened the Reef to the Guardians, who then helped to recapture Skolas and, with a desperate final attempt while in the Prison of Elders, Skolas finally met his end at the hands of the same guardians that caught him, putting an end to the Wolf Rebellion once and for all. With the loss of their Kel, the wolves began regrouping on Mars, having been rallied by Keldar, Archon Priest, who had rebuilt Orbix Prime, the wolves' previous god. Their attempt to entrench themselves on Mars were at first promising, holding their own against the Cabal. However, thanks to the intervention of the Guardians, both Keldar and Orbix met their demise. This leads Varix to believe that the wolves have truly been broken once and for all. Now, with Aramis' attempt to rally the fallen houses under a new banner, many former wolves answered the call, in hopes to fulfill the Fallen's dream to destroy the Traveler for abandoning their people. Now, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the Fallen Houses due to the fact that there are over a dozen of them. We will be covering the remaining Fallen Houses in a second video. Do let us know if you'd like for us to expand on a specific house or any part of the Destiny lore. Thanks for watching.